5 years ago, at 17, I thought I had it figured out. I had a planner for my tasks, a planner for my habits, a planner for my purchases, a planner for my goals 1 month out, 3 months out, 6 months out. I knew exactly what I was doing at every hour of every day. I felt in control. I felt productive. I felt like I was ahead of everyone around me. And for about 6 months, I genuinely believed I was building something real, but I wasn't. I was daydreaming with extra steps. And if you've ever gone deep into productivity systems, the Notion templates, the time blocking, the habit trackers, the quarterly reviews, there is a real chance you have been doing the exact same thing without realizing it. Because the trap isn't obvious. It feels like work. It looks like progress. But at the end of 6 months, if you sit down and look at what you actually built, the answer for me was nothing. So today I want to break down what actually went wrong, why I think most planning advice is designed to keep you busy rather than get you results, and what I actually do now instead, which is a lot simpler and has worked a lot better. Let's start with why planning feels so good. When you sit down and map out the next 3 months of your life, the goals you're going to hit, the money you're going to make, the habits you're going to build, your brain treats that almost the same as actually doing it. There's a real neurological response to visualizing a future version of yourself winning. It feels motivating. It feels like momentum. But here's the problem. You're not in the present when you're doing that. You're somewhere in the future where you've already won. And the more detailed your plan gets, the more time you spend living in that imaginary future, and the less attention you're paying to what's actually in front of you right now. That was my trap. I wasn't thinking about today. I was thinking about the version of me who had already executed the plan. And that version of me was doing great, by the way. Very inspiring, just completely fictional. I want to give that pattern a better name than procrastination, because I think that word has become so overused that it doesn't mean anything anymore. What I was actually doing was overthinking. And when you frame it that way, everything makes more sense. Because planning is just a structured form of overthinking. You're not avoiding work by scrolling your phone. You're avoiding work by building increasingly elaborate systems about how you will do the work eventually. The plan becomes the product, and that is a very dangerous place to be. Now, there's a version of planning that I actually think is important, and that's consistency in your daily life, your baseline behaviors. Waking up at a consistent time, getting your workout in, making your food, doing the things that keep you functional. But here's what I see a lot of people do wrong with this, and I did it too. They put all of those automatic behaviors into a task management system and treat checking them off like an accomplishment. You did not accomplish anything by brushing your teeth. You maintained a baseline. That's it. And the real danger is when your consistency systems start eating into the time and energy that should be going toward your actual goals. When you've spent 45 minutes on your morning routine, checked off 12 habits, reviewed your planner, updated your tracker, and now you feel productive even though you haven't done a single thing that actually moves the needle. Consistency in day-to-day behaviors should be invisible. It should run in the background. The moment it becomes the main event of your day, it has become an escape from the harder work you are supposed to be doing. The place where I see planning go the most wrong, and where I personally got destroyed by it, is with projects. Here's the pattern. You decide to start something, a channel, a business, a skill, anything. You get excited. You sit down and you list out every single thing you need to do to make it happen. And the list is huge. There are 20, 30, 40 items on it, and you map them all out across a timeline and assign them to specific days and specific time blocks. And it feels incredibly organized. And then real life happens. You miss one day. The whole structure shifts. You miss another. Now you're already behind on a plan you built last week, and the motivation that came from that initial excitement is completely gone. And eventually you just stop. Not because the project was bad, not because you couldn't do it, but because the planning system you built created so much friction and so much perceived failure that your brain decided it wasn't worth it anymore. I ran this exact cycle multiple times before I understood what was actually wrong with it. The fix I found was embarrassingly simple. Instead of assigning tasks to specific days and hours, I started assigning them to weeks. That one change made an enormous difference. Here's why it works. When you say, I need to do this on Tuesday at 2 p.m. You've created a way to fail. Something comes up on Tuesday. You didn't do it at 2 p.m. Now you're behind. The plan feels broken. When you say, I need to finish this task sometime this week, you've created a window. It can happen Monday. It can happen Friday. You have flexibility without losing the commitment. And because you're not constantly failing your own plan, you don't get demoralized and quit. The second thing I noticed was that when you run a project once using this weekly window approach, you start to build something genuinely useful, a realistic sense of how long things actually take. The first time you do a certain type of task, it might take you 4 days. The second time you do something similar, 2 days. By the third third or fourth time, it's a one-day job, and you know it. Now you have a real template, built from experience. That is completely different from building a plan up front based on how long you hope things will take. I am not saying that you shouldn't plan at all. What I am saying is that you need to plan in a little bit different way. So let me give you the actual framework I use now, because I think this is the part most productivity content skips over. They give you the philosophy and leave out the practical structure. Here's how I think about any project or goal. First, what is the outcome? Be specific. Not grow my channel, but post 15 videos. Not get fit, but be able to run 3 miles. The outcome needs to be something you can look at and say with certainty, done or not done. Second, write an action plan for that specific project. The list can consist of plenty of tasks, but you need to ask yourself, what are the 10 things I need to do to get there? The 10 most important things that will move me from zero to that outcome. Group things. Simplify. Other tasks can be just written down to be done on the next week or month. Third, how urgent is this? Is this something I need to finish in 2 weeks or 2 months? That determines the pace. It doesn't determine the daily schedule. Fourth, just start. Pick one of the 10 things and do it this week. Not today at a specific hour, this week. But for the ease of use, you can just plan out the time windows when you will be doing tasks for the projects without specifying the tasks. And that's it. That is the entire system. It sounds almost too simple, but simple is the point. The goal of a planning system is not to impress you. The goal is to remove friction between where you are and the work you need to do. Every layer of complexity you add to a planning system is another layer of friction. Another reason to spend time on the plan instead of the work. There's something else I want to say here that nobody really talks about in productivity content. A lot of the people selling you complex planning systems, the 10-step frameworks, the life operating systems, the color-coded quarterly reviews. They are making money from the system, not from the results. The more complicated the system, the more content they can make about it. The more tools it requires, the more they can monetize it. Your confusion and your overwhelm are a product they are selling. I'm not saying all productivity advice is useless. Some of it is genuinely good, but I think you need to be honest with yourself about whether the system you're using is serving your goals or whether you've made the system the goal. Because here's what I've noticed. The people who are actually building things, who are actually shipping work, making money, finishing projects, they almost always have simpler systems than the people who talk about productivity. The most functional people I've seen work off a short list, a rough weekly plan, and the discipline to actually sit down and do the work. That's it. The elaborate system is often a signal that someone is more interested in the idea of being productive than in the output. I spent 6 months at 17 and then about 2 years from 19 to 21 feeling like the most organized person I knew. I had more structure than most adults. I was tracking everything. I had a plan for my plan, and I had nothing to show for it. The moment I simplified, when I stopped planning my future self and started just doing something, things actually started to move. Not perfectly, not on a schedule, but forward. If you're someone who goes deep into productivity content, who finds yourself spending real time building systems and templates and frameworks, I'm not saying stop. I'm saying ask yourself honestly, is this helping me produce something? Or is this just a more socially acceptable version of doing nothing? Because the plan is not the work. It never was. Start with the outcome. Break it into 10 things. Pick one. Do it this week. Everything else is just noise.